can go to kids' church. 5th grade and under, they expanded it for the teaching today. So if we have any 5th or 4th graders that want to leave, you're welcome to. You don't have to hear me preach. It's okay. Guys, we're almost into 2025. I mean, that's like science fiction stuff, right? I mean, I remember when I was a kid, if they ever wanted to make anything seem futuristic, it was 20-something. I never thought I'd live to see 2025. And so with that, this is kind of a New Year's type sermon. We're going to start a sermon series on how to walk in the Christian life and what that looks for. I think there's something that we're kind of going through. I've talked with plenty of people, not just in our church and community, but extended friends and other pastors and other believers. And there's just this sense of restlessness that people are feeling. There's this heaviness. Some folks are battling through depression. There's exhaustion. I think even coming out of 2020, I just did some rewiring in our brains and physiologically in our bodies. I think we don't know the full extent of how COVID has affected us long term and other things. But I'm just sensing in this new year that we need a series of biblical teaching on what a Christian life full of joy and fulfillment and peace looks like. And so if this has kind of been what you've been going through and feeling and all the rest, this series is going to come alongside and encourage you and help you through that. I think as Christians, sometimes we think following Christ means we have to be so self-serving or self-giving that to do anything for our own benefit is wrong or sinful. And there's a balance, and this sermon is going to encourage you in that. So this sermon is entitled The Argument for Rest. The Argument for Rest. When I was a kid, I remember watching a movie with my family called Amadeus. If you don't know, the movie is about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, who is one of the greatest composers of all time. He was a child prodigy, composing a symphony by the age of 8. My 9-year-old can't even do his laundry. He did an opera by the age of 11. And in the movie, they portray him as this wild, kind of reckless teenager that just oozes talent but still enjoys life. He had a contemporary named Antonio Salieri who was jealous of Mozart's talent. And so he devised a plan to cause Mozart to work himself to death. In the movie, they emphasize the fact that Mozart only slept so much during the day or a day, just feeling like he could do so much more if he spent less time sleeping. And so historically, it's recorded that he typically only slept 5 to 6 hours a day. And in the movie, he works nonstop on all these different musical arrangements to get himself out of debt. Now, of course, Hollywood rarely gets the facts right. But historically, Mozart did practice not 7 to 8 hours a day and died at the age of 35. But what struck me about the whole movie as a child was how a person could work themselves to death. That just stuck with me. You see in this movie this young guy full of life and vibrant and just so gifted, and he brings himself to a point where he doesn't take time to rest and sleep and enjoy life. And I thought as a kid, man, that'll never be me. I am never going to work myself to death. That is just stupid. I'll never do it. Well, that's easier said than done, right? Most of us don't get that balance of work and rest right. As kids, we probably err more on the rest side. I don't know what is physiologically in teenagers, but there's something in them where they can sleep till noon and not even think about it. My back tells me that I got to get up around 7 a.m. at the latest. Like my body won't let me sleep that long. As we become adults, we succumb to the demands of the job, or sometimes our desire to own, or even live comfortably but so often we don't take the time to enjoy the things that we've attained. So this morning we're going to make an argument for rest. Does that sound good to you? Okay, good. So that's what we're going to do, this balanced Christian life. I believe most of us live imbalanced. And this causes us to have wrong attitudes. This causes us to get burned out. This leaves us open to temptation. And I think we can miss out on the best things in life. And one of the things that I've really noticed is when you're burned out, when you're worn out, then you get angry, you get resentful, and you start thinking, I've helped or I've done, who's there to help me? And if everybody starts feeling that way, then there's just anger and there's frustration and there's division. And I know the Bible has the answer for us. The first argument for rest is given to us by example. It's in the second chapter of the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis. God has just created everything we can see and know, and even what we can't see. He's created the entire universe in 6 days. Now, this is such a huge undertaking for our human minds to fathom that we've spent the last couple hundred years trying to make those 6 days, those 144 hours, into billions of years. But Genesis is really clear. There was evening and there was morning the first day. God is measuring time in 24-hour periods. And so, amazing. Don't ever try to measure your work and accomplishments compared to the almighty, omnipotent, everywhere God. It won't work, okay? So if that's part of your issues, you just need to let that go. But he does something really unique at the start of chapter 2. In the first 3 verses, it says this. So the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. On the 7th day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all his work. And God blessed the 7th day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creation. Now, you may read that, especially when I was a kid, I was like, well, shoot, God needed rest, right? Is this proof that God gets tired? Is this proof that God needs rest? Well, Isaiah 40:28 states, have you never heard? Have you never understood? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. He never grows weak or weary. So no, God did not rest because he got tired. There's something much more in mind for us by this day of rest. And so we're going to look at the question, why did he take a day to rest if he wasn't tired? Well, there's multiple reasons. Number one, God was creating our work week, 6 days, 7 days that still are in existence to this day. Isn't that amazing? That this Genesis account of measuring our time with a 7-day week begins at creation and still lasts today. No matter in what culture you're in, whether they believe in God or not, they still follow a 7-day week. So every week, you can be thankful and realize, man, it took 6 days for God to create everything. God is in control. He's powerful. He's capable. The second thing is, we need rest. Now, this may make you mad, but it doesn't change your situation. God could have made us with this never-ending lithium-ion battery in our back that never needs recharged, but he didn't do that. He made us, and we're not even AA batteries, we're AAA batteries. And our AAA batteries need changed out daily. We need rest. And so God says, not only will I'm going to make sure that you get rest daily, I'm going to make sure that you rest for an entire day every 6 days. All right. Well, that's kind of good to know. And then he made the day holy, which means set apart. He said this day, this 7th day, is not to be like any of the other days. It is going to be completely separate. It's going to be completely other. And so God is saying, I'm going to rest from my labor, the one that created everything, that causes everything to function. I mean, I was terrible at science. Partly that's due to not having consistent teachers or passionate teachers about science. But for me, I just understanding what it takes for your human body to work and function. and just the balance you got to keep, and the rotation of the earth and the distance from the sun. There's so many things in science that says everything has to be properly in balance. God keeps everything in balance, doesn't he? And if God can take a 24-hour period to rest, what's our excuse? I don't have time to rest. I got too many balls to juggle. God's saying, you can take a break. And I'm going to make sure you take a break. And the fourth thing is, God takes the time to delight in his creation. He wants us to take the time to pause, to breathe, to look around, and just delight. To just take it all in. To have those moments. And I love the holiday season because it's designed to make you do that, right? Every Christmas carol you hear on the radio, I mean, there's the ones that they kill every year because they overplay them. But it takes you back to those memories, right? Those memories, even thinking about my grandparents' living room, I can smell the room. The wood-burning fireplace and Grandma's apple pie, and she made the best gravy. Like, I immediately, it takes me there, and hearing some of those songs do that. Days and moments of rest, pockets of rest, cause us to just delight in life. Now, this isn't just something God established at creation and changed his feelings about over time. What God makes holy, he doesn't make unholy. Okay? What God makes holy stays holy. In fact, he ensured that this Sabbath, which means day of rest, was always observed. Now, we've been talking a lot about the book of Exodus and the Israelites, the descendants of Jacob, living as slaves in Egypt for 400 years. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. But they were a family that grew to a point that they became a nation, but before they were a nation, they were just slaves. And they were slaves in Egypt. And because they were slaves and God had to rescue them out of that, having a slave mentality for 400 years, their minds are messed up. They don't know how to process. They don't understand God. This God rescued them from Egypt, but they've been surrounded by a pagan culture and Egyptian gods and Egyptian worship for all these years. They need to understand how their world works. So, how do we know that they did a process of change? Well, when God sent Moses and Aaron to deliver his people, he didn't go immediately to Pharaoh and say, hey, I'm going to start sending some plagues your way. The Nile's going to turn to blood, and then you're going to have frogs and flies. He didn't do that. The first request that Moses and Aaron make is they go to Pharaoh and they say, hey, we need some time off. These slaves of yours, they're my people, and they worship our God, Yahweh God, and so we need a break. We need to travel 3 days in the desert, have a worship service, and then come back. So can you give these folks that you've enslaved a week's vacation? What do you think Pharaoh's response is to this request for a 7-day worship trip? Paid slaves. Exodus 5, 4 through 9. Pharaoh replied, Moses and Aaron, why are you distracting the people from their tasks? Get back to work. Look, there are many of your people in the land, and you're stopping them from their work. That same day, Pharaoh sent this order to the Egyptian slave drivers and the Israelite foremen. Do not supply any more straw for making bricks. Make the people get it themselves, but still require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They are lazy. That's why they're crying out, let us go and offer sacrifices to our God. Load them down with more work. Make them sweat. That will teach them to listen to lies. Gaslighting is old. Fake news is old. Why would Pharaoh not want to give the people time off to worship? If the people are loaded down with their work, they don't have time to think for themselves. And if you can't think for yourself, then you're more easily controlled and manipulated. Pharaoh did not want the people to believe that they had rights and freedoms. He didn't want them to dream. He didn't want them to hope. He didn't want them to have a plan. He knew that if he could get them to focus on the brick, just on the brick, and making the brick, and making more bricks, and their life was all about the bricks, then he could manipulate them and control them and just lead them wherever he wanted. They would ignore their faith and the God who chose their forefathers and made promises to them. And I want to ask you today, is our enemy any different? Are you so busy about your work and duties that your faith, your time with Jesus, and even your personal rest is constantly being sacrificed? Have you ever said, I just don't have time to pray. My schedule's so full, I don't have time to get in God's Word. Man, I got so much on, I don't even have time to sleep. I don't have time for my family. I don't have time for my spouse. I don't have time for my kids. There are so many demands on my life. You're focusing on the brick. You see, we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? We as Americans like to talk about our freedoms and our rights and all the rest. But are we really living free? Are we living the rights that God has? Our workaday world so shaped the way that we think and how we behave that this is what we become. It doesn't even have to be hard physical labor that's stealing your life from you. It can be the big... I think I'm losing my mic. I might need another mic, John. It may be the... Thank you, Pastor Sean.
It may be good things. Three of my daughters were involved with volleyball this year, and I'm not saying volleyball's the devil, but a lot of good things can come out of volleyball, but practices every night and games every weekend, it really does change what you're available to do every day. Busyness in lots of different ways can steal your joy and your life and your peace and your rest. Sometimes this culture and the mentality of people is what God had to work on. You see, He freed them from Egypt, but although they were physically free, they were still mentally in bondage. And I think that can be true of the church as well. You've been bought with a price. You are no longer citizens of the kingdom of earth. You're citizens of the kingdom of heaven. You're adopted sons and daughters of the eternal King of kings and Lord of lords. Your inheritance is in heaven and not here on this earth. We know those things and we believe those things, but mentally, sometimes we're just focused on the brick. So, these people, the Israelites, weren't allowed to have a thought to themselves, and now they're free physically. So God is going to have to rewire their brains. So He takes them to Mount Sinai, the place where He gives them the law, the instruction. This is what it takes to be in relationship with me. This is who I am. This is who you're supposed to be. This is the foundation of morals and beliefs. Remember, they had the 400 years of having the morals and beliefs of pagan gods. He had to teach them what was right and what was wrong. And what we know of as the foundation of all the teachings that's delivered at Mount Sinai is found in Exodus chapter 20, and it's called the 10 Commandments, right? The 10 Commandments are the foundational 10 truths that everything else is built upon, right? They're the non-negotiables. They're the things that are true of all of humanity that shared with us God's character and the character we're supposed to have. And right there, almost smack dab in the middle, number 4 is the command to keep the Sabbath and make it holy. You see, God believed that the rewiring of these slaves' brains needed to include the Sabbath. And I'm sure if they remembered the whole 7-day thing and God rested on the 7th day, in Egypt, they weren't allowed to take a Sabbath, right? So even if their memories reminded them of the fact that God established a Sabbath, it wasn't a part of their daily existence. And so now God is saying, now that you're mine, now that I've rescued you, now that you're free, I'm going to ensure the fact that you take this Sabbath and you make it holy. In fact, it's one of the most elaborated commandments that we have in Exodus chapter 20. Verses 8 through 11 states, remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them, but on the seventh day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. Which of the 10 commandments do God's people disobey the most? I think it's this one. I think it's this one because internally we think, well, my life is only so long, and I got to accomplish so much for the Lord. And if I take time to myself, and if I rest, then I'm sinning, and because I got to be self-giving. What we read here is this is a command, an order of God. You rest. We look at the other commandments and it says, don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, don't murder. We're like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. But one that actually benefits us, we're like, nah, I don't got time for that. Why is it? Why is it that way? Now, the Pharisees during Jesus' day were really militant about keeping all the commands and laws they added to them because in their minds, they're like, we got to behave and act perfectly so we don't fall into sin, so we don't get lost, so we can keep our nation and all the rest. And they missed the point, right? Why did God give them the law at Mount Sinai? Is it so they could be good, upstanding citizens and stay out of trouble? No. He wanted a relationship with us, with his people. And so the heart of the Sabbath isn't about the law. It's about rights and freedoms and joy and peace. And so the Pharisees in Jesus' day, as we just studied in the book of Mark, to give you a couple examples, there was a Sabbath day where Jesus and his disciples were walking toward the temple to worship, and his disciples are walking along, and they're grabbing heads of grain, and they're rubbing off the chaff, and they're popping the seeds in their mouth. And the Pharisees watching them are going, they're working on the Sabbath. They're gathering grain. And do you realize that it was Jesus healing people on the Sabbath that caused the Pharisees to start making plans to have Jesus killed? Because healing people on the Sabbath, according to their definition, was work. And so Jesus in Mark chapter 2, 27 and 28 had a response for them. He said, the Sabbath was made to meet the needs of the people, not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. So Jesus is telling them, yes, keep the Sabbath. Make it holy, but you're missing the point if you're stealing the joy out of the process. Your life is too structured. I want you to rest. Do you realize the Sabbath is the one day where you shouldn't have a to-do list? It's okay on the Sabbath for you to say, as people are making their plans throughout the week or whatever else, and they say, no, I'm not planning anything on Sunday. It's the Lord's day. He has one day where he can take me wherever he wants, and I'm not going to pre-plan it. I'm just going to follow him. The Sabbath is the day that you can say yes to what you normally say no to, and no to what you normally say yes to. Freedom. Relief. What did Jesus do on the Sabbath that we can see in the Gospels? He visits the temple and the synagogue. He goes to worship on the day of rest. We see him going to people's houses and eating with them. The example we see of that is Jesus in Capernaum going to Peter's house, and his mother-in-law is sick, and he heals her, and she prepares a meal for him. You have him healing people on the Sabbath. You have him walking in creation and delighting in God's handiwork. So rest doesn't mean that you have to stay in bed all day and cook bacon on a George Foreman grill. That's not what it means. It means that you change your pattern. The Sabbath means a day holy and set apart to delight in God and reflect upon and enjoy the fruits of your labor. That's what the Sabbath means. So, what does the Sabbath day of rest do for us? That's a question, again, us that feel we have to be productive all the time or have a reason. What does it do for us? Well, I'll go through a list of a few things the Sabbath does for us. It gives our bodies a break. Everybody needs a break. And the older you get, the more your body needs a break. You know how I know this? Because your body will tell you. Some of us get sick because we don't give our bodies a break, and when we finally pause, it says, okay, infection, disease, whatever's going to come in and force you to rest. Let me just remind you, even world-class athletes in their schedule have to schedule rest time, because if they don't, their muscles will tear. Their tendons can get overstretched. All of those things are true. If it works for athletes, it should work for all of us. Number 2, it keeps us from temptation. This may come as news to you, but rest will keep you from being tempted. This is how it works, guys. When your mind and body are worn out because you haven't had a proper balance of daily living, if you've worked and worked and worked and worked and worked and not taken time for play or rest or family or whatever else, all those desires and needs that you've neglected are going to start crying out, hey, remember us? We need something here. And you're going to start feeling like, oh, I got to fulfill these things. Well, if you're overly busy, what do you fulfill them with? The quick fixes, right? And that's what temptation is. Temptation is a quick fix to something much deeper, and it says, this will make you feel good for the moment, or this will satisfy, or whatever else. And what happens is it doesn't, does it? It betrays you. It creates guilt. It creates harmful patterns. If you have a pattern in your life of regular rest and play and self-care, temptation doesn't have the same space in your life because you're already in balance. You're already making room in your daily life for the best things. And so temptation can't say you're lacking this because there's no room for it. It gives us a heart of appreciation and gratitude. When we rest, it slows down our work-driven focus, and we take the time to look around and appreciate. So let's talk about those slaves in Egypt again, okay? Pharaoh wanted them to focus on the brick, meeting their quota of bricks every day. And that's all they're focused on is the brick. And if every day they wake up, they're thinking about making the brick and all the rest. Well, let's just imagine that these slaves get a couple days off. And they can go anywhere and do anything. They're thinking about the brick. How do they stop thinking about the brick? Well, if they're thinking about the brick, they start noticing bricks. Oh, look. Look at the palace. That's made out of bricks like the ones I made. And whoa, look at the pyramids. There's some bricks on there. Hey, that's my initials. I helped build that. When you take a break from your labor and you breathe, it lets you count all the blessings that you already have. It causes you to reflect and look around and appreciate and understand. And you're not just looking ahead to what you don't have. It makes you stop and realize what you do have. I had a good conversation with a neighbor of mine this past week whose kids are getting older. And he was telling me, he said, man, when they were younger, I worked so many hours. I made this amount of money. And man, I'm paying this off and this. And it's been great. And I don't have that burden. He said, but I'm realizing now, I missed out. I missed out on my kids' life. My boys don't want to spend the same kind of time with me. And I don't have the same kind of connection I could have. He was so focused on the bricks, he didn't make time for what was more important. And he's saying, I'm not sure I can get all that back now. It also gives us the proper mentality. So if you don't know, the Jewish day is measured by evening and morning, not morning to evening. In Genesis chapter 1, that's how the days are measured. It was evening, and then there was morning, the first day, second day, third, and onward. So, in the Jewish mentality, which I think is fairly biblical, right? They're basing it on Genesis. The day does not begin at sunrise, it begins at sunset. So what does your day begin with? Rest. And from rest, you do your work. But our North American perspective is we wake up and we work toward rest. I got to get done. I got to strive. I got to work. How different would our mentality be if we worked from rest instead of working to rest? It's like you get to eat your dessert before you have to eat your steak and potatoes and corn. In fact, colonial days, I love going to Colonial Williamsburg. We've been about 1 billion times. And one of our favorite places to go is the kitchen. You know, they used to eat their dessert first because it could spoil, first of all, with all those sugars and other things like that. And sometimes they had to be cold. Like one of the things they ate was like oyster ice cream. Sounds really gross, but it was good to them. They would do that because they wanted room in their stomachs for the best things, the things they liked the most. And then once they were, and so the stuff that would last or was less perishable, they would push off till later because it was less important, it was less delightful for them. And I think there's a proper balance for the rest of us too. Is we need to start our perspective from rest and make room for that. A day of rest frees us from the modern world thinking, that the way the modern world thinks, where everyone is driven to accomplish now as quickly as possible. Does that mountain of accomplishment ever shrink? When you accomplish something, is it done or is there more up ahead of you? It never shrinks. There's always more to accomplish. Our culture naturally pushes back rest and reflection until the job is done. Tell me, when is the job ever done? I'm going to use Pastor Dave as an illustration here. It's good to have Pastor David and Rachel here this Sunday. But Pastor David has apartments and has done apartments since he could possibly walk. Probably still in diapers, he was helping work apartments. Pastor David, is an apartment ever done? Never. Why? Because work in life is never done. And so our mentality of working toward rest or it is a lie. It is a lie. And what God tells us in His Word is, I made rest for you every day. I want you to start measuring your life not based on, I'm going to work 4 weeks and then I'm going to take a break. I want you to start making room in your daily pattern for work, rest, play, time with family, time of worship. And then I want you to take a whole day of your week, and I'm going to command it, that you dedicate just to me. Wow. Guys, this is life. This is truth. This isn't a suggestion. This is the way that we're designed by our Creator. And if we haven't been doing it, that's why we feel the way we do. That's why we're depressed and angry and resentful and all the rest, because we're going against the way we've been designed to live. It gives us a clear day to delight in our Creator. When we work, we get distracted and time is not our own. He wants us to create a balance. So, Christmas break, my kids think Christmas break is a time to do absolutely nothing. And I had a sit-down conversation with them yesterday, and I'm like, listen, guys, if you do nothing for this entire break, and there's still dishes, and there's still laundry, and there's still, things to be clean, who does that for you? They're like, you and Mom. I'm like, absolutely, right? There's got to be a balance. And yesterday, I was like, I can't sit around and watch any more Christmas movies or eat any more junk food. I got to get something done. And so I got up and I started taking down decorations and other things like that. But you know what my body said? After doing so much work, my body said, enough. I don't want you to work all day. I want you to rest. I want you to take time for me. I want you to get in my word. I want you to spend quality time with your family. You see, even on breaks, God was taking me back to the daily pattern of, I want you to work, yes, but I want boundaries and parameters. I don't want you to work 12 hours in a row and neglect your own rest or time with your family or whatever else. There's a way to accomplish what we're called to do in every day to where we end the day feeling fulfilled and complete. So let me end this message with a clear message that some of you may need to hear. It is not wrong to rest and enjoy life. In fact, we are breaking God's law when we do not take the time to do it weekly. So those of you that are like, oh, I'm not a lawbreaker, you're a lawbreaker if you're not resting. So rest. You're supposed to do it. Breathe. Enjoy life. God sets the standard for our daily and weekly patterns, not our work or our culture. Let me give you one more example. Those of you who are driven for accomplishments, to do something with your life, to be able to present something to God when you're dead and you stand before the judgment seat. Let's say we put all of your accomplishments into a wheelbarrow and you take that up to the throne of the eternal God and you say, look what I did. Look what I accomplished in my lifetime. You know what he's going to say? Michael, Angel Michael, come here. Would you take that wheelbarrow and dump that into the fires of hell? That's worth nothing. What he's going to say is, who are you? Is the name of my son written upon your heart? Did you receive his shed blood for you? Did you walk with me daily? Did you pursue me with all your heart? Listen, there's a guy in the Old Testament, in that first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, his name was Enoch, and we only know like this much about him. But it says Enoch walked with God and then was no more. What do you mean he was no more? He had the proper balance in life, made time for God, spent every day with him, and when it came time for him to die, he didn't die. He just walked into glory. What he was making space for every day, God said, all right, that veil's thin. I'm just gonna take you home with me. Now, was that after the cross or before the cross? Oh, it was before the cross. You mean that we've had all the way in the book of Genesis the proper way for us to live in our design to be fulfilled and complete and whole? Yes! Enoch is the only guy that did it that way. Is it possible for us to really enjoy life no matter what comes? I'm not saying you're not going to have heartaches or things that come up, priorities or burdens or things that you don't want to do. Listen, yeah, in a vacuum, what I'm telling you makes sense, and it's like, yeah, I'd love to do that, but I've got this. I'm saying there's a way. There's a way. You know why? Because if God is writing your story, he will make a way for you to have the balance you need to have a fulfilled life. I love studying our heroes of the faith. John Wesley, we wouldn't have Methodism without John Wesley, but John Wesley wasn't a good husband. I don't want to be like John Wesley in that way. He wasn't a good family man. He just wasn't available. He gave his everything to ministry. I want to be a type of person that has that proper balance to where I'm not only sharing the gospel, I'm living the gospel, and I'm delighting in the process. So this sermon series is as much for me as it is for you, because I'm admitting to you that I've done it wrong. I've followed the pattern that this world has set, and it's left me empty. And I'm seeing these revelations in Scripture, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to say no to things and make space for my family, for my wife, for my kids, for Jesus, for prayer time, for play. Oh man, to do something fun again, right? To rest. I get to sleep and it's okay. Yes. We have to we have to realize that although we're free, we're still thinking like slaves. And we're not slaves. We're sons and daughters. Amen? So, today there's been some revelations. We'll keep preaching and teaching, and we're going to go through a journey of this together. I just want you guys to each work on yourself as individuals. I know the temptation is to think, oh, man, so-and-so could have really used this message. Listen, we all got to work on our mentality. If you're called to share this message with somebody else, feel free to do it. I'm not saying don't, but I'm saying work on you. And when you're available to heal and feel and not numb anymore, and you have energy and excitement, then you can start ministering to others. And when they start feeling that way, they can minister to you, and we'll get a proper balance of the church. But without this balance, we're just a bunch of suffering islands, and we don't need to be that way anymore. Lord Jesus, thank you for the power and truth of your word. And I pray, Lord, that we would stop disobeying you, and we would take this Sabbath rest every week. That we would be militant in the sense of we're going to put you first, and at the same time, God, we would relax on what the Sabbath looks like as you lead and guide us this special day of the week. I pray, God, that you would start changing our mentality to what we can receive daily and what that looks like, Lord. Help us to not be so obsessed with one thing or another. Sometimes we get obsessed with play, and it's harmful to us. Sometimes we get obsessed with work, and it's harmful to us. Sometimes we get obsessed with rest, and we become lazy and of no use to anyone, especially you, Lord. Help us to get that proper balance, to embrace the way we're made, to see how you designed the world, and seek your face so that we can be everything that you designed us to be. In your name we pray. Amen.